Tonight's the night. Hey, great to have you here. So today I'll be reviewing episode 7 of Dexter Resurrection. As usual, we'll run through the episode details and then give an overall score at the end of either negative, neutral, or positive. And as a quick reminder, if you enjoy talking Dexter or other pop culture topics, please consider subscribing to the channel for more future content. So here we open up with Prater's helicopter that is landing from the prior episode at this remote mansion location. It looked a little bit fake here, I wasn't entirely sure, but overall I thought it was fine. And right away, Charlie and Prater seem to be having some tension with one another. And then we have Rapunzel ask Dexter if he spends time outside at all. Dexter responds with, if you count fishing, which obviously Dexter has that kind of background, but he's supposed to be vegan here, so I'm a little bit unsure, like, you can be vegan and fish, obviously, but felt like a little bit of a mix up there. Prater then heads over to the group and announces that Mia is now dead, which Dexter obviously knew already from the radio in the car right over. Rapunzel seems to be the only person who's kind of troubled by this. He's like, oh, Mamma Mia. But they all do a toast in her honor either way. We then shift over to Harrison and Elsa hanging out, and he tells her that he may go into criminal justice. And I definitely thought after Dexter recently told Harrison that he reminded Dexter of Deb, at the same time Harrison's being a little bit unsure about his future, that we would get a similar pathing going into police work that Deb followed. And then back with Dexter, Prater presents everybody with a massive meal here and mentions that he also has a vegan option there for Red, but we have Dexter finally at this point say, you know what, I'm gonna eat some meat actually and leave his fake vegan life behind, and indulges in all of the food there. And while hanging out there, we have Harrison text Dexter about checking out this college together later on that night. Dexter winds up agreeing to it, but he's still stuck with this group for now, and Prater wants him to do some kind of show and tell for the group. We have Rapunzel go first here though, and he shows this video of out in public where he's on this path and he fakes a bike injury falling over, and there's this runner who stops to help him out. He winds up grabbing her and suffocating her there on the ground. I guess there was nobody else on the path because it felt a little bit risky to do out in public in daylight, but he winds up killing her there and then cutting off her ponytail. We then show Dexter on his own in a separate room, and he's practicing for the show and tell, which is pretty hilarious here, seeing him pretend to play up his personality as this evil, dark passenger. He's just doing all kinds of impressions with the mirror in front of him there. In that same scene, we have Dexter then talking to Harry, and it gets a little bit serious when Harry tells him that Dexter isn't like these other people here, but then Dexter reminds Harry that Dexter is why he chose to kill himself. So Dexter doesn't think he's much different than the rest of this group. He does flip-flop a little bit here and there, whether he's as bad as these other people or he's completely different, he's a much better person, so a little bit back and forth there with his character. Dexter then heads out to take his turn doing show and tell, and he does what he frequently does and shares his real truth, but in vague enough terms. He's pretty sincere and mentions only taking off his mask and being himself when he has a victim in front of him at the end of their life. Dexter then refers to a comment that Gareth said at one of the earlier meetups, the great yearning. This is kind of a funny scene though, because we as the audience realize that this apparently wasn't the same Gemini brother that gave that line earlier on in the season. Dexter also points out to the group that if their loved ones saw them for their true selves, they would turn them in a heartbeat. And after Dexter's presentation, Prater looks a little bit troubled. We then cut over to Batista, who's grilling Wallace about Mia's death. He's like doing a bunch of stuff saying, oh, the cameras magically got shut off. And she's kind of like going back and forth with him, being like, you really think Dexter was able to get in the prison system and kill off Mia? I don't know about that. He's being super emotional though, while Wallace and Oliva are both being logical, using facts and numbers. But we do find out here that apparently Mia's fingerprints were on all the evidence, but they were not on the watch from Ryan Foster. So Wallace is still flattering Batista's theories a little bit here. And we also have Batista finally ask for Dexter's DMV records. So we know here that he's going to wind up being at Dexter's address at some point. And then back at this serial killer party, we have Gareth criticizing that Dexter didn't use kill details in his speech. Both Gareth and Rapunzel point out that there's been a lot of weird things happening this year, referring to the deaths of Lowell and Mia, and this obviously started around when Dexter joined them. We then have Prater approach the group and ask to speak to Dexter alone. And based off his earlier mannerisms and what we heard from Gareth, it seems like Prater's going to be mad here, but apparently he was actually pumped about how relatable Dexter's speech was. Prater points out that nobody knows the true Leon Prater. They only know what he shares with the media. And we finally get a little bit more backstory on Prater. He talks about his parents' death and how he wrote a letter to the guy in prison who killed his parents in a hit and run. Supposedly, the guy told Prater that he was drunk and angry with his girlfriend, so he intentionally crashed his car into Prater's parents. And strangely enough, afterwards, Prater eventually befriended this guy, whose name is Cooper, and he told Prater that he's killed before. Prater points out that Cooper died before age 50 though, but he found other prisoners to talk to and collect their trophies. And during this conversation, I'm wondering if all of what Prater's saying here is actually true. Did he actually kill Cooper himself? Not too sure. But we then have Prater tie that story back into Dexter's speech, telling him that it reminded him of the bond that he had with Cooper, and he shares the first letter that Cooper sent him, which he points out as being his first trophy. And they pretty much wrap up that conversation with Prater telling Dexter that his speech was great and that the truth is never boring. We then cut over to Batista, now at Dexter's apartment, and he runs into Blessing. It feels like that family is frequently outside in their front porch area. Batista tells Blessing that he's an old Miami friend, and Blessing says he lives downstairs and mentions that Harrison's going through a hard time right now, and here I'm hoping that Blessing doesn't share too much about Dexter's life. And then back at Prater's estate, Gareth is off sitting on his own. Dexter winds up going over and sitting with him and telling him that he knows his secret and that he's a twin, but Gareth denies it at first. Eventually, Dexter starts to get under his skin, and Gareth starts getting angry at Dexter after he mentions the idea of telling Prater. Eventually, Gareth does open up though, and admits to it, pointing out that nobody else has figured it out. Dexter then brings up his own brother Brian here, once again using his own life references, but not really giving too much detail. He tells Gareth that it was too late for them to bond like the Gemini twins did. Gareth then tells Dexter that rule number 1 is to never be seen together, and that they have their own form of communication, to which Dexter responds with, like, leaving notes at bookstores, and then Gareth looks totally freaked out. Dexter then asks if twins can feel each other's pain because he killed Gareth's twin. Gareth then freaks out here and attacks Dexter with this broken glass. The others in the background see the fight going on, and after Dexter winds up getting slashed in the forearm, he winds up stabbing Gareth in the neck and killing him. And it's pretty clear here this is what Dexter wanted all along, to provoke Gareth, almost like he would do with someone like Dokes, and then claim self-defense. The others wind up running over to see what happened, and Dexter says that Gareth attacked him, and he was going to kill everybody, convincing them that Gareth killed Lowell. So here Dexter feels like he tied up things nicely. Prater and Rapunzel seem to buy it, but Charlie doesn't. She says that it doesn't make sense. Gareth killed in pairs. We then have Charlie bandaging up Dexter, saying he was lucky that he was inches from death, and says that she's seen it happen. She's made it happen. So Charlie definitely has a little bit of darkness. We then cut over to Harrison, who's waiting for Dexter at the college event that night, and is disappointed not to see him. This blonde girl comes up to him though, and starts chatting with him. She has a wrist brace, and jokes about how she got it. Then Harrison says that his mom was murdered, and he killed his dad to mess with her, but obviously we as the audience know that's actually true. She says her name is Gigi, and we find out that she's a sophomore there, and is giving the tour for the criminology school. We cut to Dexter finally back at his car, and Prater mentions to him a final meal in the future. So clearly there's going to be at least one more meetup this season with the group. Although is Dexter going to kill Rapunzel before that moment, and it's going to be just him and Prater? Not too sure. Dexter does text Harrison back here, mentioning that he's stuck in traffic. And then back with Harrison at the school, he winds up heading into a classroom and seeing Detective Wallace there, and they both make eye contact, and she's there giving a visiting lecture series. And this whole college sequence that I'm about to talk about was probably my favorite part of the episode, but it was super convenient that Detective Wallace is here giving this lecture at this event that both Harrison and Dexter are going to be attending. We have Wallace say to the audience that she's going to talk about a current case, and here we're thinking, is this going to be Ryan Foster? Is Harrison about to freak out maybe? But it's actually for the New York Ripper, and we do hear her say that the Ripper stopped killing years ago. Dexter does finally show up here, and of course him and Wallace also make eye contact. Dexter goes down to sit next to Harrison, and he's like, did you know she was going to be here? And Harrison's like, nope. Wallace then plays an audio tape that is apparently from the New York Ripper, who still leaves these audio tapes behind. She also shows a bunch of nasty images from crime scenes. I'm not really sure she would do that in a presentation like this, but I guess these people are potentially students that are going to be seeing things like this on a recurring basis. But since there are tapes left behind, technically we do have some voice audio from the potential New York Ripper. I don't know, it could be like a Saw situation.
I want to play a game.
Where they're changing the voice, so it doesn't really tell us too much, but interesting to see that that's being done regardless. Wallace then points out that she thinks the Ripper used something like a crowbar, but we as the audience know what the weapon actually looks like, since Prater has it at his estate, which is making my Prater theory seem more valid, or at least somebody that's tied to Prater, like either someone in his family or somebody in the Charlie branch as well. Wallace then also starts to describe serial killers as emotionally deficient, and Dexter wonders to himself, is this how Harrison views me? And after the presentation, Dexter reaffirms to Harrison that he feels differently about Harrison than anyone else in the world, even if it isn't traditional love. Wallace then approaches the two of them, and Harrison tells her that he's interested in becoming a cop. She then asks if he's following in his father's footsteps, and Dexter's like, huh? And she shares that Batista has visited her. And here we get the very typical Dexter starting to spiral a plan together, making Batista look crazy. And he says, oh, Batista! He spiraled after his partner became the Bear Butcher. You may have heard of James Dokes, and this also follows my theory about Batista being pitched as being a little bit in too deep here, and not rational about the case, being too emotional about Maria and Dokes. Dexter then does bring up Maria's death, and pitches Batista as being a loose cannon who lost his way. And before walking away, Dexter then tells Detective Wallace that the blood spatter of the New York Ripper photo on screen more so matches something with a handle or a hook at the end, It was pretty cool having Dexter be the old lab geek Dexter here. Him and Harrison then wind up walking out, and Dexter says that he's surprised Harrison wants to be a cop, and mentions what I've talked about with him being compared to Deb, or even Harry, by having a strong moral compass, to which Harrison responds with saying that Dexter was actually the one who inspired him, which is a very touching moment. We then very much get a go away dad moment where Harrison shoos Dexter away so he can talk with Gigi, and they start to flirt a little bit and exchange numbers, so maybe Elsa is just going to be a friend, unless we perhaps get a love triangle here. Separately, we have Dexter getting in the car and putting on a hat from the gift shop of the college, and he's talking to Harry as a proud dad here, and here I'm thinking it'd be super hilarious if Harrison just showed up and sat on Ghost Harry's lap, which he does actually show up and get in the car, but Ghost Harry's gone by then. But before Ghost Harry disappears, he mentions he would have liked to be here at Harrison's graduation, and Dexter's like, you will be, right? It's just a super touching moment for the Morgan family. And now in the car, Harrison asks if Dexter is worried about Batista or Wallace, and Dexter's like, nah, no big deal. But I don't think Batista's going to wind up leaving things alone as easily as Dexter's implying. And now back at his apartment, we see that Dexter kept some bloody glass from Gareth number 2 to add to his collection and to put next to his Gemini twin. I'm still thinking here he definitely should not be keeping trophies, but I guess he feels compelled to do so. But it seems like they're going to come back to bite him if somebody like Batista finds them. Dexter then starts hearing some music that reminds him of Miami, and here's Batista upstairs. He winds up going up there, and Dexter and Angel wind up bitterly greeting here. Angel says he's just passing through and says, just thought I'd try to catch ya. So pretty funny line there. I'm also wondering, why did Dexter just kind of barge in there? I feel like if somebody did that to his apartment, like if Blessing just came on through, he'd be super frustrated, but maybe Blessing has different rules for his apartment. Dexter then offers to take Batista home. He's like, hey, you want to ride home, hermano? And in that car ride, Dexter threads Batista pretty explicitly here. Batista winds up bringing up Dokes, Maria, and Deb, which ironically, he actually didn't directly kill any of those. I get he kind of was indirectly involved with them though. And I'm thinking at this moment, even though he's still a little bit cryptic with what he's saying, Dexter should not be talking here. I'd personally be afraid of Batista recording things. And then we eventually get a line from Dexter saying, if I really am who you think I am, this can't possibly end well for you.
I am the one who knocks.
To which Batista responds, I'll take my chances, buddy. Dexter then just kind of kicks him out of the car there, and Batista leaves something in the car though. Turns out we see that it's AirPods that he can track from his phone. And that wraps up this episode, so definitely a bit of a cliffhanger with the cat and mouse game between him and Batista. What do you guys think of Batista this season? In the original series, he was one of my favorites, but Batista's personality's definitely changed in this show. I don't like him that much anymore. It's probably a combination of him acting differently, but also being against our protagonist in Dexter. Overall, I really enjoyed this episode. We did continue with some plot conveniences like Gareth attacking Dexter or Wallace being at that college event, but it didn't take away from the episode for me. They had a nice blend of real tension and comedy here. And for a score, I'm going with a solid positive rating. I'm really enjoying the Dexter and Harrison dynamic that they've had over the last few episodes, and I'm hoping that keeps up. Things are definitely closing in on some big event with Batista or also with Prater. But those were just my thoughts. What did you think of this episode? What parts did you like or dislike? What are some of your theories on where they'll take things next? What are your thoughts on the New York Ripper? For me, it's either Prater or someone that he knows, especially since the cops don't know what the kill weapon looks like, but Prater has it. We'll see though, but let me know your thoughts on all things Dexter Resurrection down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.